When I visited my friend's house after years away, I never expected his mother to hold me the way she did, slowly, tightly, and then whisper words that changed everything. I've missed this. It had been years since I last stepped onto that familiar porch. The wooden boards creaked under my weight the same way they used to when I was just a teenager, running up here without a thought in the world. Now, at 24, everything felt both smaller and larger at the same time, like my memories were overlapping with the present moment, testing me to see if I could tell the difference. The doorbell button was slightly faded, the brass handle polished by countless hands over the years. I hesitated before pressing it, my reflection faint in the glass. A flood of memories came back: birthday parties, late-night video games with my friend, the smell of pancakes drifting from the kitchen on Sunday mornings. Back then, this house had been my second home. Now it felt like I was trespassing on a life I'd outgrown, unsure if I still belonged. Then the door opened. She stood there, my friend's mother. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. She hadn't changed in the way I expected. Yes, there were new lines around her eyes, the soft trace of time at the edge of her smile, but those only seemed to make her more graceful, more striking. Her hair was swept back in a loose knot, a few strands falling free, catching the light. And her eyes, warm, surprised, with that spark of recognition that seemed to melt the years between us. "Look at you," she said softly, almost to herself. "You've grown." Her voice carried the same low, calming tone I remembered, though now it stirred something different in me, an awareness that hadn't been there when I was younger. She stepped aside, motioning me in. The moment I crossed the threshold, the house embraced me with scents I hadn't realized I remembered: brewed coffee lingering in the air, faint lavender from the laundry, and the comforting woodiness of old furniture. The living room was exactly as it had always been: books stacked neatly on the shelves, framed photographs watching from the walls, the couch with its slightly worn cushions. It was as if time had paused here, waiting for me to return. "You must be freezing," she said, brushing her hand lightly against my sleeve as I set my bag down. That small touch, innocent, fleeting, was enough to send a quiet current through me. I managed a smile, though inside I felt unsteady, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. She guided me toward the kitchen, her presence steady and familiar, yet layered with something I couldn't ignore. The sound of her footsteps against the hardwood floor echoed softly, pulling me along with the rhythm. Sitting at the kitchen table, I realized how strange it felt to be both a guest and not a guest, to belong here and yet see everything through new eyes. She moved gracefully around the room, pouring tea, her movements practiced and natural, but I caught myself watching more closely than I should have, noticing details I never had before. In that moment, I understood, this visit would not be like the others. Something unspoken had shifted between us the instant she opened the door. The steam curled up from the teacups, carrying with it the faint scent of chamomile. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood still marked with tiny scratches from years of family meals, while she moved with easy familiarity around the counter. The way she set everything down, careful, deliberate, reminded me of the way she used to fuss over my friend and me when we were kids. Only this time, her attention wasn't spread across a noisy household. It was entirely on me. She slid the cup toward me, her fingers brushing mine for the briefest moment. A small smile tugged at her lips. "You take it the same way, don't you? Just a little honey, no sugar." I blinked. "You remembered that?" Her laugh was soft, a little amused. "Of course. I noticed these things." That sentence lingered in the air longer than it should have. I tried to cover my reaction by taking a sip, but the warmth of the tea only seemed to deepen the heat already stirring in me. We began to talk, at first the easy, surface-level things: my work, where life had taken me since moving away. She asked questions with genuine interest, listening intently, her eyes never wandering. Every so often, she'd tilt her head, resting her chin against her hand in a way that made me feel like she was studying not just my words, but the person I had become. "And your family?" she asked after a pause, her voice softening. "How are they doing?" "They're good. Busy, As always. I hesitated, then added, but it feels different now, like we're all just moving in separate directions. You know what I mean? Her expression shifted, something tender, almost protective. She nodded slowly. I do. More than you think. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable but heavy with unspoken things. She broke it with a gentle laugh, reaching out and placing her hand on my forearm. You always used to talk like this. More thoughtful than the other boys. I liked that about you. Her touch was light, but it stayed just a heartbeat longer than casual. My skin warmed beneath her palm, and when she pulled back, the absence of it left me oddly restless. She sipped her tea, her eyes meeting mine again. There was something in her gaze, steady, searching, that made my chest tighten. I realized I was studying her just as much, the way the light from the window traced across her cheekbones, the faint tiredness hidden behind her smile, the graceful way her hands wrapped around her cup. She looked beautiful, but not in the way that startled. It was the kind of beauty that drew you in slowly, like a song you wanted to hear again. The kitchen clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, wind brushed against the windows, but inside, time seemed to have slowed, holding us both in this fragile, unexpected space. I caught myself wondering if she felt it too, that subtle shift, that awareness neither of us had named yet. The kind of awareness that made every small gesture feel like it carried weight. And as her laughter filled the kitchen once more, light and familiar, I realized that what should have felt ordinary instead carried the first spark of something I couldn't ignore. Later, she asked if I could help her with something in the pantry. I followed her into the narrow space tucked between the kitchen and the hallway. The air inside smelled faintly of spices and flour, a comforting blend that carried me back to childhood dinners. She stretched up on her toes, reaching for a glass jar high on the shelf. Without thinking, I stepped closer. Here, let me get it. My hand brushed against hers as I reached past, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The warmth of her skin lingered against my knuckles before she pulled her hand back slowly, a small, almost shy smile crossing her face. Still tall enough to reach the things I can't, she said lightly, but her voice carried a softness that made my chest tighten. I handed her the jar, and when she turned, she had to pass close by me to leave the narrow pantry. The brush of her arm against my side was brief, but the pressure of it, warm, steady, seemed to echo long after. Back in the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as if to steady herself. You know, she said, her gaze slipping toward the window, this house feels too quiet these days. I miss the noise. I miss company. Her words settled heavily between us. I nodded slowly. I know what you mean. Sometimes it feels like everything changes too fast. People drift apart, and you don't even notice until it's already happened. Her eyes flicked back to mine, and for a second, the air seemed to hold still. There was a vulnerability in her gaze, something she wasn't saying but couldn't quite hide. Silence stretched, not empty but charged. My heart beat harder than it should have for such a simple moment. I tried to look away, but my eyes kept returning to her, the way her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, the faint crease between her brows, the way her arms softened as though she didn't want to be closed off after all. She broke the quiet with a small laugh, though it sounded more like a release than amusement. Listen to me, going on like that. You didn't come here to hear me complain. I don't mind, I said softly. I like hearing you talk. Her expression faltered, just for a second, before she smiled, and it was different from before. Not polite, not casual. Softer. A smile that reached her eyes but carried weight behind it. She moved toward the stove, fussing with a kettle that didn't need fussing. I could tell she was giving herself something to do, but her shoulders betrayed her, tense, uncertain. And standing there, watching her, I realized I was no longer just visiting an old family friend's home. Something invisible but undeniable had shifted. The air itself felt different, charged with a quiet tension I couldn't explain, and didn't want to escape. The afternoon light had begun to dim when I finally said I should be heading out. Hours had passed without me realizing it. Our conversations had meandered through old stories, laughter, and long pauses where words seemed unnecessary. Still, there was a quiet heaviness in the air, as though neither of us truly wanted the visit to end. At the doorway, I slipped on my jacket, fingers fumbling with the zipper more than they should have. She stood just a step away, arms folded loosely, watching me. There was something in her expression I couldn't quite place, part smile, part hesitation. "Thank you for coming by," she said softly. "It's been a long time since the house felt alive like this." Her words made me pause, my hand resting against the doorknob. I turned back to her, and for a moment we simply looked at each other. The silence was almost fragile, like glass, one wrong word and it would shatter. Then she moved. Slowly, carefully, as if testing her own courage, she stepped closer. Her arms lifted, hesitated in the air for a heartbeat, and then settled around my waist. It wasn't a quick, casual embrace. It was deliberate, unhurried. Her body pressed gently against mine, her cheek finding its place against my chest as though it had been waiting there all along. I froze, then exhaled, letting my arms come around her shoulders, holding her carefully, afraid that any sudden movement might break the moment. I could feel everything, her warmth seeping through the fabric of my shirt, the faint tremor in her breath as it rose and fell against me. Her perfume lingered, subtle and familiar, mixed with the natural scent of her skin. My own heartbeat echoed in my ears, quick and uncertain, until I realized I could also feel hers, steady at first, then quickening the longer we stayed there. The hug stretched on, longer than politeness would ever allow, but neither of us moved. She shifted slightly, pressing closer, her arms tightening just enough that I knew this wasn't about courtesy. This was about need, about holding on to something she hadn't allowed herself in far too long. My hand rose instinctively, brushing against the back of her shoulder, tracing the line of her arm as if to tell her wordlessly, "I'm here. I don't mind." Her hair brushed lightly against my jaw, soft and silken, and the sensation was almost dizzying in its intimacy. Time seemed to slow around us. The ticking of the hallway clock faded, the world outside the door disappeared. All that remained was the quiet steadiness of her breathing, the warmth of her body pressed into mine, and the unspoken understanding that this hug meant far more than either of us had planned. When she finally shifted, it wasn't to pull away, but to draw in closer, her breath brushing against the side of my neck. Her voice came so softly I almost thought I imagined it. But I hadn't, not yet. The words were waiting, trembling on her lips. Her breath warmed the fabric of my shirt, steady but trembling just enough that I could feel the emotion behind it. I had held people before, friends, family, but never like this, never with this weight. There was something unspoken in the way her arms clung to me, not desperate, not fragile, but deeply human. A longing that seemed to seep through her skin into mine. And then, just as I thought she might finally pull away, she tilted her head, her lips brushing close to my collar. Her voice came in a hush, barely audible, as though she wasn't sure she wanted me to hear. "I've missed this." The words slipped out with a softness that struck me harder than any declaration could have. They weren't playful, they weren't casual. They were confessional. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as her meaning sank in. She wasn't just speaking about the hug, or about me. She was speaking of closeness itself, of touch, of warmth, of being held without needing to explain why. It was loneliness distilled into 3 quiet words. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let my arms draw her a little closer, pressing my chin gently against the crown of her head. The gesture said what words couldn't: "You don't have to miss it anymore. Not right now. I'm here." Her body responded almost immediately, her shoulders softening as if she had been carrying weight for too long and had finally been allowed to set it down. She let out a breath, one that trembled with both relief and hesitation. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, quick now, betraying emotions she might not have meant to reveal. My own pulse raced to meet it, as though our bodies had found a rhythm neither of us had intended but both of us accepted. When she finally lifted her face, she didn't let go. Her cheek brushed against my chest as she tilted her head just enough for her eyes to meet mine. Up close, I saw everything, the faint shimmer of unshed tears, the uncertainty hidden beneath her steady gaze, the vulnerability she rarely showed. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered again, shaking her head slightly. But her hands never left my back. Her fingers curled gently into the fabric of my jacket, holding on. "You don't have to take it back," I said quietly. My voice felt steadier than I expected, though my heart was racing. "I understand." Her lips parted as though to answer, but no words came. Instead, she let her forehead rest lightly against my chest, closing her eyes. I felt the subtle brush of her hair against my chin, the warmth of her breath against my skin, and I knew that silence was enough. In that suspended moment, the world narrowed to just us, the quiet hum of the house, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the fragile weight of her confession still hanging in the air. And Thugui lingered in the doorway far longer than two people should after saying goodbye. Her arms still rested around me, her forehead brushing softly against my chest, as though letting go would undo something she wasn't ready to release. When she finally eased back, it wasn't by much, just enough to lift her eyes to mine. Her hands slid slowly down my arms, pausing at my elbows, before falling away reluctantly. The absence of her touch felt almost louder than the words she spoke next. "I don't know what came over me," she murmured, her voice low and unsteady. I shouldn't be saying things like that." Her gaze wavered, darting toward the floor before finding mine again. There was a quiet panic there, but also relief, as if confessing even that much had lifted a burden. I swallowed, searching for the right words. "You don't have to apologize. It wasn't wrong. It was honest." She gave a short, breathless laugh, shaking her head. "Honest, maybe. But reckless too. I'm not blind to how this looks. You're younger, she stopped herself, exhaling sharply. "I'm old enough to know better." Her words stung, not because of the truth in them, but because of the way she said them, like she was already preparing to push me away. I took a careful step closer. "I don't care about how it looks. I care about how it feels. And right now, it feels real." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Instead, her hand lifted almost unconsciously, hovering as if she meant to touch my face but thought better of it. She let it fall again, curling her fingers into her palm. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It's not just about me. People would talk. Your friend, my son, he wouldn't," her voice faltered. She pressed her hand to her forehead, eyes closing briefly as though the weight of it all was too much. I wanted to take her hand, but I waited, giving her space to let the words settle. When she opened her eyes again, I said softly, "Maybe you're right. Maybe people wouldn't understand. But that doesn't change what's here. You felt it too, I know you did." Her silence was telling. She didn't deny it. Instead, she let out a slow breath, her shoulders sinking as if she'd surrendered to the truth she had been trying to resist. Then, cautiously, almost timidly, her hand found mine on the edge of my jacket. Her fingers brushed against mine, hesitant at first, before slipping between them. The warmth of her skin against mine was steady, grounding. She squeezed lightly, and for the first time since she'd spoken, she looked directly at me, no mask, no pretense, just raw vulnerability.